Denmark and Greenland warn of fundamental disagreement after White House talks on the US plan to seize or acquire the Danish kingdom's territory.
Germany's Vice-Chancellor Lars Klingbeil has warned that Europe's ties with the United States are disintegrating.
Japan and the Philippines have signed a new defense agreement allowing tax-free sharing of critical supplies during joint training in a bid to counter growing threats from China.
A meeting between the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland with US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Wednesday produced no resolution to the escalating tensions surrounding Donald Trump's plan to seize or acquire the Danish kingdom's territory. While the talks failed to persuade the Trump administration to back down from its bellicose rhetoric, leaders from Denmark and Greenland say they don't agree with Trump on the U.S. controlling the island, but are ready to work toward common ground.
Ideas that would not respect territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and the right of self-determination of the Greenlandic people are, of course, totally unacceptable.
It's very important to say it again, that how important it is from our side to strengthen our cooperation with the United States, but that doesn't mean that we want to be owned by the United States, but as allies, how we can strengthen our cooperation, it's all our interest.
Meanwhile, Denmark and Sweden, alongside France and Germany, announced on Wednesday the deployment of soldiers and military exercises to Greenland amid growing instability in an effort to ensure the security of the Arctic. US President Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed acquiring the sparsely populated territory to be vital to US national security, raising concerns for NATO's future.
Germany's Vice-Chancellor Lars Klingbeil has warned that Europe's ties with the United States are disintegrating. Klingbeil pointed to what he called a historic period of upheaval under US President Donald Trump's administration. He cited several reasons why he came to his conclusion, including Washington's recent raid on Caracas in which it captured Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro.
I told you we're going to do a lot of things.
He also cited Trump's threats to take control of Greenland, his administration's comments in its national security strategy claiming that Europe was facing, quote, civilizational erasure, and warned for a decay in the shared interest in free trade and open markets. The Vice-Chancellor said he had become even more convinced in recent days. Just this week, Klingbeil visited Washington with Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul.
Japan and the Philippines have signed a defense agreement allowing tax-free sharing of supplies during joint training aimed at strengthening deterrence against China. Japan's Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi signed the pact with Philippine Foreign Secretary Teresa Lazaro in Manila on Thursday. Japan's top diplomat also announced at the signing ceremony that Tokyo will be beefing up security and economic development assistance to the Philippines. The new defense deal, which still awaits ratification by Japanese lawmakers, is the latest forged by Tokyo and Manila to deepen their security alliance. It'll allow tax-free provision of ammunition, fuel, food, and other necessities when their forces stage joint training exercises. It comes amid increased tensions with China after Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaishi said Tokyo would militarily intervene if Beijing made a move on Taiwan. The Philippines and Japan have also had their own separate territorial conflicts with Beijing in the East and South China Seas, threatening to draw in the US, a treaty ally of both nations. Japanese and Filipino officials say the new agreement will also help enhance disaster response efforts, as well as taking part in UN peacekeeping missions.
China's trade surplus surged to a record of almost $1.2 trillion, around 1.031 trillion euros last year, the government said Wednesday, as exports to other countries made up for slowing shipments to the United States. Beijing's exports rose 5.5% in 2025 to $3.77 trillion, around 3.6 trillion euros, but imports for the year were flat at $2.58 trillion. According to customs data, the surplus was boosted by trade gains in December, with exports climbing 6.6% from the year before, better than economics estimates. Since US President Donald Trump took office and intensified his trade rift with the world's second largest economy, China's exports to the US have drastically decreased, but sales to other markets, including Europe, have more than made up for this reduction. On Monday, the European Union signaled a de-escalation in its EV trade dispute with China by issuing new guidelines allowing Chinese electric vehicle makers to offer minimum prices instead of facing steep anti-subsidy tariffs. Analysts expect exports to continue supporting China's economy this year despite trade friction and geopolitical tensions.
The United States has said it is suspending the processing of immigrant visas from 75 countries, the latest move by President Donald Trump against foreigners seeking to come to America. A State Department spokesperson said that, quote, "The Trump administration is bringing an end to the abuse of America's immigration system by those who would extract wealth from the American people." The State Department did not immediately release a full list of countries. However, a White House spokesperson mentioned Somalia, Russia, Iran, as well as Brazil, Egypt, and Thailand. The latest move does not affect tourist, business, or other visas, including for football fans seeking to visit this year's World Cup, although the Trump administration has vowed to vet all applicants' social media histories.
The United States has said it is moving into the next phase of the US-brokered ceasefire plan. In a social media post on X, US President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff said the second phase involves disarming Hamas, rebuilding the war-ravaged territory, and the establishment of a technocratic government. This would consist of Palestinian experts that will administer daily affairs in Gaza under American supervision. However, Witkoff did not offer any details about who would serve on the new transitional Palestinian administration that would govern Gaza. The ceasefire reached under Trump's 20-point plan took effect in October. Under the first phase of the deal, Hamas released all but one hostage it was holding in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians who were held in Israeli prisons. Former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko was charged for allegedly offering bribes to members of the Ukrainian parliament. On Tuesday, the country's anti-corruption bodies reportedly raided the offices of the Fatherland Party, which is led by Tymoshenko. According to the investigation, several Ukrainian MPs received benefits for passing decisions on draft laws in parliament in December. The anti-corruption bodies released a video that includes recordings of the alleged arrangements. The person's face in the video is blurred, but Tymoshenko can easily be identified by her signature hairstyle. The former prime minister confirmed the news of the raid on Wednesday morning, but rejected all allegations against her.
The Louvre Museum has started raising admission for most non-European visitors by 45% as it tries to shore up finances after repeated strikes and chronic overcrowding. The change affects visitors from most non-EU countries, including the United States, which typically accounts for most of the Louvre's foreign tourists. The price hike from €22 to €32 is part of a national differentiated pricing policy announced last year that's coming into force across major cultural sites, including the Versailles Palace and the Paris Opera, among others. Guided groups will pay €28 with tours capped at 20 people to maintain the quality of the visit, the museum said. French worker unions have denounced the Louvre ticketing change, saying it undermines the universal mission of the world's most visited museum. The CGT Culture Union has denounced the policy, arguing it turns access to culture into a commercial product and creates unequal access to national heritage.
The water in the early stages of the baths was apparently not very clean. It's not surprising because the water was supplied by a water lifting machine. So you must imagine there was probably a slave running in a kind of hamster wheel, lifting up water buckets and supplying the baths with water. Well, the building of an aqueduct is something very expensive, even at that time. And you can compare it to building an airport in modern times. Yes, in Roman time, in early imperial time, the society was getting more richer, and each city wanted to have an aqueduct. You must imagine that the aqueduct of Pompeii was probably fed from the so-called Aqua Augusta, and that's a giant aqueduct. It's about 120 kilometers long, running from the Apennines all the way to the Bay of Misenum, west of Napoli, and it supplied something like 10 cities with water, with branches running from that central aqueduct.